Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I have to say it too.
My name is Ian. Welcome.
Welcome. My name is Eric.
Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Ian. Hey, everybody.
I think we're doing a podcast today. Is that what we're doing?
Oh, dude. If this isn't the podcast, I showed up for the wrong thing.
I did too. So I hope this is the podcast.
I hope so too.
Do you know what we're talking about today?
Bro, I know what we're talking about. We are doing a Philomythia.
You can say it either way. I made the word up, so say it how you want.
Philomythia.
Philomythia? That's a different topic.
We are doing the Philomythia Reviews, where we watch a movie or a TV show or kind of whatever we want, and we analyze it and look at it through a lens of as if it were a D&D game, a role-playing game. And we're watching the story be told to us kind of after the fact.
Yeah, kind of maybe when the gaming group as a whole is telling the tale or recounting the tale of their adventure.
Right.
Yeah. So, what movie did we pick? Or actually, it was your pick this time.
Right. You picked the last one, which was when we did 13th Warrior, which is our first one.
That was the first one.
This is our second one, and I picked my favorite movie, Terminator 2. I love this movie so much. I don't know why. I think it was one of the first rated R movies I was able to watch as a child, but even then it was when it was on like ABC, and so it was edited for TV, but it was the first time I was given license to watch this, and I loved it. I loved it so much. The music, the characters, I just fell in love, and ever since then I've just loved this movie. And I need to say, after I picked it and I started watching it, I was like, what the hell have I done?
What have I done?
This is not going to be... This is going to be so hard to find D&D in this. And it's probably the most notes I've ever taken.
Yeah, me as well. Because I had a similar thought where I was like, okay, how am I supposed to interpret this? But I'm like, wait, it's just, again, for me, it's just stories.
Right.
But, getting into the swing of it, especially, I think we're both DMs. We've DM'd for a while. You just have to turn the imagination switch on and you start getting all these ideas and be like, oh, right. You could do this, and you're just interpreting mechanics for the table, Let's just jump on in, man, because we can sit here and talk about what it was like. Yeah. But let's just talk about what we did. Let me do this really quick. Let me just give a tiny little factoid. Sure, yeah. Just some few things about the movie. So it was directed by James Cameron. I think it was like one of the biggest movies of the time. It was like the thing. Right. It was released July 1st, 1991 in Los Angeles, and then I think across the United States on July 3rd, 1991. Nice. Yeah. And some of the effects still look really good, like all of Stan Winston was the effects guy, and he's like George Lucas, I think, a lot of the monster movies and special effects, and like her dream. And by the way, spoiler alert, because we're going to talk about the whole movie, so if you haven't seen it, go watch it and then listen to this, or if you don't care, then it doesn't matter to you. But when she has a dream about the nuclear bomb exploding, like all the people, how they get torn apart, I read a little factoid because I watched it on Prime that said like nuclear bomb experts say it's the most realistic depiction, or at least it was, of a nuclear bomb going off. Dude, I remember seeing that scene as a child, and it was crazy. And even watching it as an adult, I'm still like, these dudes knocked it out of the park with this movie. Yeah. Like, it's classic. Yeah. It's so good. Yeah. So I'm not going to say any more than that. Of course, we'll link to it in the doobly-doo, but Wikipedia has great info for stuff like this, and IMDb as well. I have a fun fact that I will spout right now before we get into this. Arnold Schwarzenegger's classic line, "I'll be back," stems from Terminator 1. That's the first time he said it. That's where it comes from, is Terminator 1. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, I always wondered where that first came up. Right. But yeah, Terminator 1. Yeah. One last factoid I'll say, too, is it got nominated for 6 Academy Awards, and I think it won like 4. Probably all effects. Probably not. Oh, probably. Yeah. And music, maybe. That music, jeez. That Terminator song, bro. That first, like that theme, that is like so iconic to me.
I love that little melody. I love the rhythm, and I still get chills just thinking about that song because I'm like, I love this song.
The music was very moody. Like when it first starts, like when you have like the voiceover and the info dump.
Yeah.
I feel like the DM was going for like a strong vibe here. Like,
oh yeah,
they're going for a real hard, like, because it has the soundtrack especially has a very heavy '80s vibe to it.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, let's talk about our DM, James Cameron.
Oh yeah,
Who's DMing the table in our alternate universe. I felt like Terminator 2, like Terminator 1 was like the original campaign. And then Terminator 2 was the updated campaign, and he wanted to make some modifications and make it be crazier. And I think they used an old rule set and then updated a 5e for Terminator 2.
Oh, okay. I love that.
Yeah.
Me and Eric always kind of, we don't even plan for this. He looked at it like campaign, and I looked at it as a one big one shot that maybe gets cut in half.
Well, see, that's how I started, but as I went through it, I'm like, this is almost like a one shot or a short adventure. It's like 4 to 6 sessions, you're done.
Right.
Which goes back to like the idea that these are like high level characters.
Oh, for sure.
They're all starting with like extra cool stuff. They can all do crazy things.
And I would even say that there are some, like John would probably be a little lower level.
Yeah. Well, he might be a lower level, or because I felt like he was a rogue.
I did too.
What was I don't know where the notes are. It's too many notes, but
Hey, let's just start at the top and we'll get to it.
Well, I had a few things about just the DM setting things up. Like it seems like he homebrewed chase mechanics, because a lot of the fight scenes happen in chases, and that's not really something you see. It's something more you'd see in like Blades in the Dark than D&D, which is a shame.
Right.
So I think Ian and I both started getting inspired by watching a movie like this to be like, ooh, how could you do this in D&D? You'd have to kind of jerry rig it, but that's, if you love DMing, you're like, oh baby,
right.
Here we go.
When you see like, oh, I can make a chase scene where it's crazy. And I agree with that. Like, it's a continuation of something that us as the watcher, we may not have known about the first one too much.
Right. Or it was maybe a few years ago or something. So it's like, yeah, we did the thing, we had fun, we want to do another one. And I think the DM likes explosions, and so he homebrewed rules for the environment to also get destroyed.
Right.
Things would crumble if like a player did a really powerful attack or something.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
You know?
So I kind of did, the first thing that happens is like there's kind of this setup that's done. There's a narration that kind of brings you into the world, like Eric was saying.
It's kind of updating the info dump, because I feel like the DM kind of retconned and added a bunch of story to the world that wasn't necessarily there in the first one.
And then I think that's when we get our introduction to one of our characters, one of our players, and that is, on my notes, I just refer to him as T, but it's the Terminator. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And I call him T2. That's just, you have the T-1000, which is the big bad, and T2. Right. I was like, that just makes sense to me. One thing I'll say, I know you're going to go into that, which is super cool, is I kind of thought of all of the stuff to do with Sarah before she gets out of the hospital, like when the party finally gets together. I felt like that was like a character session or a thing the DM did with her or with her player separately, because think how intense that was if you just watched her scenes. Oh yeah, it's like, oh shit, what's happening, my son? I gotta fucking get out of here, yeah, because she's a crazy character. She's another kind of like badass female along like with Ripley.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like that was the thing. Linda Hamilton is who plays her, and after that after T2, she was definitely revered as that. Right. Just like Ripley was. Yeah. So I put that he was a barbarian, and I also put him as a like slash dex fighter, high level, so he actually has a high dex and high strength. Obviously a warforged. That's what I put him as.
Yeah, that's what I had. Yeah. I wasn't sure about class. Definitely warforged, just because the mechanics are already there to play like a generated being or a constructed being, various types. The one thing that doesn't track with me on barbarian is T2 doesn't feel rage.
Right.
So he's very calm. So I feel like he's some kind of melee something, and he's got some crazy buffs in terms of like his AC is crazy high. I had it when he knocks that dude out or whatever. He takes his stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, he now gets, because he stands out a bit. He gets a +5 to deception just because he blends in a little bit now, like with the sunglasses.
That's so. The reason I had him as barbarian is, and that he doesn't rage, is I was like, he may not outwardly rage, but I feel like the rage is what gives him tons of resistances, tons of ability to overcome a lot of the damage outputs that hit him.
I guess you could reflavor it too, like keep the rage mechanics and call it like machine resistance or resilience or something, where he just has this machine-like ability to keep going, you know.
So I had that he went into the bar and failed charisma checks to get what he wanted, and then just begins to start like using non-lethal damage to try and get what he wants,
right?
And just starts critting back and forth, just destroying the bar. And in that moment, that's when the player's like, look, man, I don't have any charisma, so I feel like I should be able to like use my strength modifier as my like persuasion sometimes. And the DM's like, sure, but if you're gonna do that, you have to do something strength based first, and then I'll let you use that same skill to like persuade or intimidate. And he was like, okay. So then that point going forward, he's just smashing and breaking to intimidate, and he's just rolling good.
Right. When you put the sunglasses on, I feel like I was like, he has dark vision as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think he's totally got dark vision. So,
and I felt like a lot of the stuff that you saw for the T-1000, which is the other Terminator, the bad Terminator, is the DM making rolls, what Sly Flourish calls front rolls. So you're kind of making rolls for how the world is developing where the PCs are not, like behind the scenes.
I agree with that for sure.
And he also gets, he can blend in really easily. And
one
thing I did that was brutal, because I was like, the DM basically determined that most of the combat is going to be with this one creature. Like there are certain battles at the end where there's shootouts and stuff, but I was like, the DM made T-1000 immune to all damages except for one, and then he made it secret.
Right.
So you don't know, the PCs don't know what'll kill him, and then he warns the PCs that, hey, you might have to run away a bunch. Just remember that.
Right. And so just for fun, my initial first like knee-jerk thought of what the T was, because I kind of looked at this as trying to make it in a fantasy setting. Like, how would I create this in a fantasy setting? So I put that my first thought was that the villain is a changeling, like a changeling that has somehow subdued mimics to work for him and do what he wants through magical means. So he has the ability to change appearance, use these like mimics to do other things as well. Was my just first shot. Like, I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah. That's interesting that you went that way, because I went the opposite, where I'm like, how can I take mechanics that are designed for high fantasy roleplay and put them in a modern context? And so it's obviously you have a bunch of magical mounts that will work for motorcycles and vehicles and things like that, and a lot of it you can get away with reskinning. So I was like, he's some kind of, again, he's like T-1000 is, but he's just way crazier. So he has the shape-shifting ability. You can pull from other monsters, and his hands can also be weapons.
Weaponized.
Yeah, he can turn them into like blades, and so highly kind of homebrewed. Especially like the immunities, because I'm like, you can't kill him.
Right.
It doesn't even hurt him. It just kind of delays him a little bit.
And that's what led me to the idea of like, maybe he's a lich and his phylactery is hidden within him, and you can't, like, to destroy it, you'd have to know how to get to it.
Right.
Or burn the whole thing.
Right. The one, I mean, you could use that, but the one thing is he's not casting spells or anything either. So there's none of that.
Right. In the way I interpreted his spell casting and stuff is kind of like the guns and stuff like that.
Oh, when he's picking up firearms and stuff.
Right, when he's using weapons like that, I was like, spell-based stuff.
Gotcha.
Again, like I said, I looked at this kind of...
Right, if you were doing Terminator 2 in, like, Faerun or something.
Right, well, like, I kept thinking more like Exandria, because it's got, like, kind of mechanical stuff as well as magic.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads us to our introduction to John comes in.
Really
right?
quick, because one thing I kept meaning to say was, I feel like originally there were supposed to be a party of 4, but due to scheduling conflicts, the kid who plays Tim, they never say his name. I only know it because of Prime. It shows you who the actors are and what character they play. He's a little buddy of John's, and they hack that ATM, but then Tim's player, due to scheduling conflicts, was like, "Oh, I can't play." And so they just made him an NPC and then just got him out of there and gave all the PCs extra stuff because it's like, well, now this train's a running. So they all have extra buffs.
I had a very, very similar thing with that. I was like you're saying, he was meant to be a player and they start, and I kind of took it a different direction as the game starts and he's a new player. He's never played before.
Mm-hmm. And then he dies.
Well, all the rest of the group is super like role play heavy. They're way into it, and so he was like, "I'm done, guys. I'm not going to play." And they're like, "All right, well, we don't need his character."
That's hilarious.
So he just kind of gets shoved out of the way. But I also put John as a kind of like you did, a rogue.
Yeah, definitely a rogue.
But I gave him like a level or 2 in like artificer or something due to his ability to mess with like the electronics, the certain things like that.
See, I had to do, because I feel like rogues, for like, instead of lock picking, you're just hacking. Like, it's a similar, you're getting into security stuff. But I feel like because of his origin, he gets the ability to use firearms and like he knows like infiltration stuff, and he's like this crazy little soldier child, you know.
I'm into that as well, for sure.
One thing I was going to say too is I thought of, since T2 is the big bad from the first campaign, people liked him so much that they wanted him to come back, and one of the players was like, "Look, let me play T2. Let me like be T2." And it's like, the DM is like, "Okay, but you have to do a few things. So like, you're going to die at the end somehow."
Right.
And you, nobody knows this yet. This is a secret, but you have to do whatever John says.
Yeah. I had something like that as well.
So these weird stipulations, you know what I mean?
I put him as, like you, rogue.
Oh, right.
With a little artificer. But that's, again, because of the way I'm looking at what I was doing and differently than how you were. Mm-hmm. And with, John's little buddy was his first time playing. Like I said, he bails on the game. We get rid of the character. I was like, that's so funny, too.
Just takes him out. Never see him again.
Right. And I mean, as I was going through this, I really created a lot of notes for like, as if I were making this adventure. Mm-hmm. So like, how would I make the arcade? What would the arcade be? Mm-hmm. So I have notes to that kind of stuff. But it's a bunch of detailed stuff. So only if we really brush against something will I like really talk about it.
Sure. Yeah.
Because after that scene, we introduce Sarah.
Right. And for me, all the stuff with Sarah is like her character session.
Right, I agree.
So we're obviously seeing it, and I felt like the DM knew when they actually started the first session, like where they were in her character session. Like he's keeping track of time, you know.
I think so too. I definitely have that she fails like some deception checks when she
has low charisma.
Right, and but she does succeed on a sleight of hand at some point.
She steals the paperclip.
Yep. And I put her as again, kind of like you did. She was a fighter, some sort of fighter based with some rogue in there as well.
Like a battle master or something, like a souped up battle master, where she's like, she can use every weapon. One thing too, to back up when John comes in, I kind of feel like John's player just got a hankering, so he derailed kind of what the DM was thinking. He's like, I want to go steal stuff. So the DM's like, okay, I mean, go ahead. The DM has to react to the PC going into left field. And I feel the same thing with Sarah's like stealing the paperclip and trying to escape, because the DM knows they're probably going to come up and, come over and save her.
Yeah, exactly. And she's going to try and do it herself now
pulling it.
And I was like, man, this is so crazy. I also feel like there's some of those scenes you see of like Dyson and stuff like that that kind of come in. I feel like that could be almost like not info dump, but little pieces of information that are actually told to the characters later in the story, but since it's a movie, we're getting it now.
I always felt like that was, again, the Dyson stuff was just DM making rolls, like, okay, what's going on with Dyson? Like, how far along is he? We have a long-term clock until the chip is finalized.
Right.
And you even get a specific date for the players after a while, like, here's your countdown right here.
I also put that, like, this was another part of that thing that I thought was interesting, how we talked about chases, but this is different, how the T2 and the villain, the T1000, are searching for John. So I'm putting that they're, like, the very first time the T2 rolls perception, fails, because John rides right by him.
Right.
Doesn't even see it.
And I feel like he's behind for like the first couple of sessions where like he's just rolling horrible on his perception.
Horrible. Just so poorly.
He shows up right at the last possible moment, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. My next notes really delve into when they're in the arcade and T1000 is searching for him.
Right, okay.
That's where my bigger notes are. If you have something...
I just had a few things that was just fun as like thinking if I was the DM for this, as like when he's rolling. I called it Skylabs because I couldn't remember what the lab was called. Yeah, what is it?
Oh, Dyson Labs.
It's not Dyson Labs. It's what you said first.
Oh, Skynet.
No, Skynet's the thing they make. It's Cyberdyne.
Cyberdyne.
Yeah.
I'm so dumb.
It's CSC, Cyberdyne Security something is the lab, like the final dungeon. But I had, as he was rolling, he was kind of building details into the lore while they were playing. As you do, if you DM, you'll roll things and be like, oh, I just thought of something. Okay.
Right.
And then, I just called it the Mall Showdown. So, like, everything that happens at the arcade and the big fight.
Right.
And everything.
I show that, John fails kind of like a charisma check and gets scared of T2 coming around the corner, and T2 readies an attack, and John gets ready to like fight back as best he can, but then the T2 is like shoots the villain,
right,
and that like makes everything, and he hits him, and that like John sees that, and John loses his fear and is like, oh shit, what's going on? And then he tells him to run, I think. So he runs. Yeah,
he tells him to run, and then the first Terminator fight happens.
Right.
I had the idea that the DM kept secret whether Terminator was good or not. So the player also doesn't know really, like, what's happening? Oh, okay, he's helping me out. Sweet.
Right. Oh, that's cool. I like that. Yeah. Obviously, they start the chase then. And John is not doing so hot because T2 gets, like, incapacitated for a moment. And then has to catch up.
Right, gets thrown through the plate glass window.
Yeah. So all of a sudden he's incapacitated just for a moment, slowly gets up, and by then T1000 is on John and we initiate the chase. And I feel like the chases in this movie, now that we're here at one, really inspired me with the idea of some sort of fun chase mechanic where the players are actively like fighting while trying to like escape, like trying to do things during a chase.
You even think about the opening to like James Bond Casino Royale, where they like run up the crane and like there's fighting and then they run, and
right,
it's like, how can you give that sense of action and immediacy to D&D? Because it's not, D&D's combat is not necessarily terribly exciting except for little bits, and then it's a lot of like debating rules,
right.
The one thing I had, this is just flavor, but after, again, they're busting the scenery, right? So like the environment seems really destructible,
right?
And they bust through the wall. That John uses a dash action to just be like, whoosh.
I'm out of here.
And he's a rogue, so I think their movement can get more movement.
Oh,
too.
That's super far.
Yeah, but yeah, that's pretty much the same stuff I have. And then we get into the chase sequence I said that John at this point rolls a nat 20 and a skill check, and that's when he gets out of the parking garage and almost causes that huge accident. So he sets up a little obstacle for T1000. Doesn't really work terribly great, but he does try to make it harder.
Right, and that's when T1000 gets himself a vehicle.
Yeah, and now everybody has vehicles.
Yep, and they're chasing each other, and sadly, John's vehicle is the weakest one, so he is gained on quickly.
Right.
And it becomes a problem.
And then T1000 does a maneuver where he has like a diesel truck without a trailer, and he ramps it off this overpass into a canal, and it's the infamous famous canal chase. And
it's so, watching that scene is so cool now, even because it's so I basically John is just not doing well with his rolls to get away, and the T1000,
and he's at disadvantage too.
The T1000 is just gaining on him,
cranking it,
and now at one point John almost starts to take damage from the T1000 running into him,
ramming him.
But then we have T2 pursuing, and he's just rolling crits to get by obstacles.
He's shooting locks off of fences and shit. It's crazy.
Yeah, so just crit.
Yeah.
Boom, he gets through that obstacle. Okay, bro, there's another thing. Crit 20. Okay, you're through that one. So tons of these successes brings the T2 within range finally.
And I feel like he aces a strength check to just pull John right off his bike.
Dude, I have that exact same thing right here. Strength check, boom.
Totally. I said it was contested, but T2 is so much stronger. There's almost no contest. No pun intended.
And then villain crit fails on a maneuver.
That's what I say. Totals the truck. And then I said it's so bad that the truck explodes, and the DM again loves to make things explode. That's their favorite thing to describe as and then the thing explodes.
and the heroes aren't sure if they've succeeded in doing anything, so they just bail.
Right.
I have a little vignette scene where John tries to contact those NPCs that's from the beginning.
I called it RP interlude.
Yeah, yep. I have a lot of RP in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have that the villain is able to deceive John. Successful deception check.
Oh, really? I had that John knew something was up because he's she's talking weird.
Right.
She's saying something weird.
That's why I was I think he successfully deceives, but it's not
he knows something's up. He doesn't know what's wrong.
Right. He's something's going on.
Yeah. The dog's barking. It was a passive perception thing, though, because he's a rogue. He has high wisdom, maybe. He hears the barking. He's okay, something's wrong. I know that environment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd be to that, for sure.
And then T2 gets on the line.
And just shuts it down almost immediately. Yeah. It's the T1000 has no chance to deceive T2.
And this is when I kind of felt like John's player wanted to give John an arc. Knowing, because his character and the player know that John's supposed to become this thing in the future, and now he knows that it's real because this Terminator has showed up. Where one thing that we forgot to mention is he thinks his mom is totally crazy when things start. He's really resentful and pissed, and he feels like he was lied to his whole childhood.
For sure.
And so I feel like he kind of ramps up the snottiness a little bit, kind of just being a twerp to have that arc where he's going to end up at.
I also think that as this goes on, I think that there is I don't know I think he's a chaotic good or something.
Yeah.
Because there are certain things he doesn't care about, but when it comes to at this moment, when there's role play happening, all of a sudden there's something happens, and John tells T, the Terminator, you can't kill anybody anymore.
Well, it's
no more.
It's when they're arguing. So and then he wants to go save his mom, and the Terminator is no, I have to get you out of town. We have to go as far away from here as possible. And then he starts screaming. He's now, now. So I had the DM makes a check to see if anybody hears and responds to that. That's around.
Oh, nice.
And that's two just NPC thugs, basically just a thug stat block. And they finally, you can kind of see him in the background, and the shots just slowly,
yep.
Probably a 4-notch clock or something. Okay, they're going to get here after a little bit. they show up like, what seems to be the problem? And by this time, John knows that the Terminator can do whatever. So he has the Terminator beat up the two thugs, but stops him when he tries to kill him.
And I feel like at that moment, the Terminator gets hindered because John's like, only use non-lethal from now on.
Right.
You can't use lethal damage. So from here on, the Terminator only uses non-lethal damage.
It's always non-lethal.
Yep.
And I feel like there's certain points where when he's in the building and he's like shooting the grenade launcher, it's like you have to roll pretty high not to like kill anyone right now.
Right.
And he does good.
He does great.
Spoiler warning.
So then after they kind of decide they're going to go, the two members, they're going to go save Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
We cut to like kind of the stuff that's been happening with Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
And how she's like all of these things, and I put when she succeeds on a sanity check when that dude like locks her up and licks her.
I was gonna say she has a really weird interaction with an NPC.
Yeah,
and I feel like it's something the DM and her talked about and like talked through.
Right,
and also the consequences of that as well.
Right. Well, because I feel like the DM was like, okay, roll a sanity check to see if that like. Can you
composure
hold and not let? And she succeeds.
Mm-hmm.
Rolls a crit success again with the lockpick. Gets out. Crit on stealth to kind of sneak out,
and then knocks that dude out.
Well, that doesn't she like sets it up. And what I even put, if we cut right to that, is right at the last minute, Sarah failed. Like she's rolling stealth to come out of her room after setting up this trap. Fails stealth. Dude turns around, ready to attack. She rolled high initiative, so she gets to go first, and literally just rolls crit attacks on him and just ruins him.
Oh, I had she surprise attacks because she just goes up to him and just smacks him, like bashes his face in, basically.
Right.
And then locks him up.
Since he sees her, I was like, she failed stealth. They roll initiative. She goes first. Boom. But so yeah, it's I love how both of us take this. So kind of like different lenses for it.
I honestly didn't see that he saw her. It was just like she comes out and she gets right up to him.
Well, because she throws the keys at him and he catches them. Is the first thing that he does.
No, she throws the keys at the dude in the bullpen. Not the dude that licks her right outside her door. He doesn't see her. She goes up and just beats the shit out of him.
Oh yeah, you're right. That's true.
Yeah.
But he does turn to see her.
Does he?
As she's approaching, yeah.
Because I thought he was checking. I just remember him looking, because there's doors on each side. He's looking in the other side.
And the other door.
Yeah.
And he's looking at a broom handle that's broken. And it causes the audience to go, what is going on?
Right.
And she comes out of the side with the broom handle.
Right.
To beat his face in. And then she takes his nightstick.
Yeah, she takes the billy club.
But she used an improvised weapon at first.
And at this point, the DM is also rolling. He's filling up a clock for the T-1000 to find Sarah. Yeah, absolutely. She does not know this.
She just knows nothing.
But it is happening.
She does know that the T2 is out again because of the photos that they've shown her.
And then she goes. That's when she goes down to the bullpen.
Yeah.
And does the whole. That's so brutal when she fills. It's like Drano. She fills that syringe and then puts the syringe in
his neck.
The psychiatrist's neck. And the psychiatrist is kind of like her personal antagonist. Like she does not like this dude.
Yeah, I have her takes a hostage with using some sort of poison thing.
Right.
Just something.
And it gives her a plus to intimidation or persuasion or something, because she gets everybody. She's very persuasive.
Very. When she tells them, I believe that we're all already dead, so don't fuck with me. It's like, open the door. Open the door. So yeah, she crits on intimidate, and I feel like she has either a low passive perception or fails her perception check, because that's when the dude kind of gets her from the side and pulls the needle out, and she abandons the hostage and takes off.
I think it could also be a contested roll where
that could be,
because he's sneaking, he's behind the corner. The DM could have rolled a secret, like contested against her passive or something, and he rolls real high and just fucking.
That works for me too. I like that.
And she gets the keys. Like, she loses her hostage, but she gets the keys, I think, from that guard, and then another chase ensues at this point.
For sure. Okay. This one really did like such a surprising amount of fun D&D to like observe through this.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me more happy to like, oh, think of all the movies that could be you. There's no way to tell what you'll like harvest from any of that.
Right. That's a realization I had today where I'm like, you could use this. I mean, we're doing it to like have, entertaining content, but you could really use this to analyze movies and create ideas and practice your creativity as a GM. And like just how we're like, ooh, chase mechanics. Wow, I've never thought about how you could reproduce this kind of action in D&D.
Right.
So, and one thing, because how I was saying, I thought of all the stuff for Sarah up to this point as a character session. So it's all happening in one thing. Is she does really good with the series of challenges of unlocking these doors, getting through them, closing them before her pursuers get there. And she breaks the key off and she runs. And then her personal session ends where she gets to the elevator and the Terminator walks out.
Right.
Sees him, and that's the end of the session. So her player does not know. She has no idea that the Terminator is her friend.
And I even put that she like fails on a sanity check right there as well.
Yeah, she's out of it right there.
Because she takes off.
She runs right back to all the orderlies who immediately tackle her.
Right. And so she just fails all of her saves.
Yep.
They tackle her, restrained. It's just terrible for her at this moment. She's freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
And, all of these people are so focused on her, they don't see T2 stroll right up and just destroys a bunch of basically village people, if you will. Just average citizens.
Just NPCs.
Yeah, just citizens.
They might have a little bit, like orderlies, you might give them like a bonus to strength because that's what they're there to manhandle.
Right.
One thing, too, I wrote down was when T2 and John get to the gate, that's actually when he makes T2 swear not to kill anyone. Like right before they get to this first big location.
Oh, yeah.
And then that's when he shoots the guard in the kneecap. So
in
I'm
the
like,
knees,
that was kind of the player's response, like, okay, well, fuck you. Oh, my name.
Pow, pow. He'll live.
He'll live. Oh, that was the other thing is the first time he speaks, since we're saying it's a role-playing game, Arnold has nothing to do with it.
Right.
That the player had made a choice to speak like Arnold, and everyone was like, what? Why are you speaking like that? But he dives in wholeheartedly.
Right. Then just rolls with it the whole time.
And by the end, everybody loves it.
Oh, everyone loves him. They're like, oh my God, he's so amazing.
And I thought since T2, like they're all tackling her, he gets a surprise attack. And since I had him, I think, as fighter because I thought, or at least he had a few levels, because he's got a bunch of attacks, and then he takes action surge and does his turn again, and he's just like
just wrecks them all,
wrecking just like eight people.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
And that's when I feel like John succeeds on a persuade check to get Sarah to pay attention to like, look who's here.
Right.
And that's when we cue
T-1000.
The villain arrives.
Mm-hmm.
The villain is now here, and I feel like that would be a great session opener too. Now that the party is together,
mm-hmm.
just like Lazy DM says, start big. So the start of the session would be like T2 destroys a bunch of NPCs, and now here's the villain.
Right
here.
And you could do too where you could cliffhang just when T-1000 shows up.
Oh yeah, you could do that for sure.
And then you start right there. Shows up, you're in battle,
and now we're in a chase again.
Chomping. And I said the first round of combat is all ranged attacks and running, basically. So everyone's shooting and running to the elevator.
Yeah. And I keep putting, like, whenever these chase dynamics happen, the players are just not prepared for that. I think it was like something the GM was super stoked about, but the players were not ready.
And he didn't have them trial run. They just he explained it and then they went.
So they start rolling stuff and they just fail miserably constantly.
And also when they do hit the T-1000, he heals right back up too. So they're realizing, like, oh no, what's happening here? I also had then the whole battle moves into an elevator, so it moves into a tiny closed space, and with these chase mechanics, because I actually want to make these and try them out, like do some play testing, but you can phase into a chase and then phase back into like normal combat.
Right.
so you can seamlessly, it's not, you can go between what you need, just like in a movie. There'll be chase, and then they'll scrap, and then they'll run. And then it just gets brutal. T2, I said he scored a critical hit. I think he shoots him right in the head, and every time T1000 gets shot in the head, it's kind of more devastating.
Right, it's right at the beginning of the elevator. He shotguns him right there.
Yeah. And then they're fighting through the ceiling of the elevator, so I was like, well, both parties have full cover, so everyone's firing at disadvantage or casting spells just like blindly.
And they have a higher AC.
Right, yeah, higher AC.
But some of those attacks do hit the players, so they take a little bit of damage from that.
Sarah takes a critical hit too. Like she gets sliced.
Yeah, she gets hurt. Then as they escape the elevator, Sarah succeeds on an intimidation check to procure a new vehicle.
Right, they hijack the police vehicle, and then we go back into a chase.
Yep.
At this point,
immediately.
Eventually, T1000 catches up, and then there's the whole combat, and it's really just, again, it's combat in a chase. So everyone's moving. Yeah. You can't really move much. Like maybe if you're in the back seat, or you want to get on the roof of the car or something.
Yeah.
But it's just basically a scrap in this small space. And I just as kind of looking at the script, and also what I would think if I was formatting the campaign or the adventure, that would be the end of Act 1 right there. The party's together.
Oh, okay.
We know who the villain is. The tensions kind of hit the certain notch. Now we're going into the second act where characters really get to develop and interact with each other and those kind of things.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. This is a big, heavy role play part of the campaign.
Right, and we relieve some tension because they got away. They got her out. They got away, at least for now, and they go hide in that abandoned or that closed-up garage.
Right. I also put, and I know it doesn't make sense, but I put Sarah, asks John if he's okay, and he's like, yeah, I'm fine. And so she casts Cure Wounds on him, and he gets mad about it because he's like, I said I'm fine. Mm-hmm. Then they, like you said,
Party takes a long rest. I was like, is it a short rest? No, they wait the whole... It's an 8-hour rest. I'm like, that's so D&D right there. It's insane.
Right. And I put... Oh, I want to hear what you did right here.
Well, I was just going to say, so they hide out, and then T2 gets to use the sentry's rest. They steal another car, and then they start to head south.
What I did right here is, since this would be Chapter 2 or Part 2, is they do a little bit of, hex crawling and role-playing.
Overland travel.
Overland, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, as soon as they're on the highway, it's overland travel. Now you're on a hex map. Rations are more important,
right?
Etc. Gas, since we're
characters are just talking, exposing things.
Yeah, and what's cool is the car would be really easy just in terms of how far it could go in a day. You would just find whatever the equivalent was, like an airship or something, and how fast it can go, and how many miles it can travel per day or whatever, and then you just switch it over. Yeah,
that's good. I like that.
There are lots of great just characters saying hilarious things, and this is where the Hasta La Vista baby comes in, because John is like, no man, you gotta be cool and say these things.
Yeah, shine them on, man,
shine them on. And then the car breaks down because the DM of course rolls something to see, this is a really old car, how's it doing? Click. It's not doing good.
It's not doing
good. This is also the DM through T2 uses this chance to dump a bunch of lore on the party. So you find out about Miles Bennett Dyson, responsible for Skynet. It's being created currently. He gives them specific dates for everything. So it's August 4th when it goes online, and then August 29th, both in the year of 1997 when it takes over. And it makes Russia, or fires on Russia, so Russia will fire on the U.S., blah, 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 blah.
Which is so funny to hear that right now in life, watching that movie. It's so weird. It's like, go crazy, man.
You know what the year is where they send T2 back from?
2013, right?
No, 2029.
No way.
And I'm like, we're getting pretty close right now.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And that was the end of that. Just so info dump, characters are equipping, overland travel. It takes them a few days. And then we get to the next location, or really the first location of Part 2, Act 2, which is Enrique's hideout, which is an NPC contact from John and Sarah's background, basically.
And again, I feel like this is a good point for where the characters are establishing, they're reinforcing connections to each other. building rapport with each other, doing, little tasks. This is a weird part in the game where you're trying to hide out and figure out what are we going to do.
Right.
And villain is still tracking them. I feel like the GM's rolling
clock.
stuff,
Yeah.
and it's just...
And if they forget that, he can always nudge T2 and be like, hey, you know exactly what T1000 is trying to do right now. I also thought there's a list of like firearms and supplies that the GM has made, and so John and T2 kind of go over the list of weapons, and Sarah starts to fix up the truck, and then for no apparent reason they switch.
That's right.
So maybe T2 has a higher proficiency with machines.
Could be.
And so they switch. I figured Sarah, since she's a battle master, she can look over all the guns and make sure everything's in working order, and because everything, I love how there's like dust on all the weapons, like they're in that weird bunker. They all look super old and used. Like, I hope these all work.
Right. Well, then they bust them out, clean them up, and they look great.
Yeah.
Since I was looking at this kind of differently, my thoughts are the same. It's just they weren't firearms. They're crossbows, they're magic weapons, they're this.
Right, because you went the opposite way.
Right. So like, I still feel like we're saying the same types of things.
Oh yeah.
My lens just looks at it through like, how would I have done this in like Faerun and stuff? And I'm like,
both of those views are valid. Where, hey, can you be creative enough to take fantasy rules and make them modern,
right? And
be creative enough to make a modern like story fit into like a fantasy realm. So they're both good ways to go for sure.
Yeah.
And then I have again John kind of being a low-key dick because he's not really helping. He's just kind of talking about his problems.
Yeah.
But he's also giving the help action to T2.
Right.
But he's really just kind of being like, and blah 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 blah, and everyone's like, what's happening? He's not. Why is he not helping?
I put the thing that happens next really would be Sarah has a nightmare, fails sanity check.
Right. This is because I was like, why would she fall asleep? They just had a long rest in the scheme of like play.
Right.
And that's when I was like, maybe there are traumas that each character has to take something that mechanically affects them in a role-playing sense. Kind of Blades has some of this. They have a little bit of crossover there. And I'm like, what if her trauma is obviously seeing the Terminator, and then she has this whole role-play breakthrough where she's like, this is the only man that can keep my son safe.
Right.
And she has this huge relief, but she has to roll her trauma check, or maybe it's like her stress gets too high kind of thing, strain gets too high, and she just breaks down, and then that's why she falls asleep. And the DM he's never described the dream fully, so he just lays the whole thing out, and it is brutal. And then he blows everything up again.
Just blows it all up. So she wakes up.
Yeah.
And is lost her mind.
So she has no choice. She has to go.
She has to. She just goes, and she's gonna go do what she's doing. Right. And so I put, due to investigation and insight from the two players, the John and T2, they're able to deduce, oh shit, she's gonna go kill Dyson.
Here's what I had was something similar, but she leaves, doesn't say where she's going, and she doesn't know where she's going either, because again, she's kind of under DM control. She's NPC-ified just momentarily. Loses her mind, right? But there is a clue, which is, what is it? No fate.
No fate, but what we make.
Right. And so through, like you said, checks, they're able to deduce what this is, but also John starts to get suspicious about who his dad might be.
Oh.
That's the other thing. He's like, wait, that's what my dad, that's what I say to my friend that I send back. But also, my mom says that's what my dad always used to say. And he's like, never mind. I don't want to talk about this. I'm uncomfortable.
And let's see, where do I go?
And then they realize she's heading straight to Dyson. So it's kind of clever. The DM finds a way to like turn the tide and force them to just collide with Dyson, like to up the tension as much as possible, basically.
Right.
And then I have all the next. I just kind of named the chunks as if I was like you did. As if I was planning this out for, Sly Flourish, and The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, which we'll probably do an episode on soon because it's really good. But they have this thing where they say, name your locations something memorable, like make fantastic locations. So I tried to think in terms of that, and also like big bubbles of maybe it's each session is this, or each one's a chapter or something. So this is All Roads Lead to CSC in my mind.
Oh, nice. I put that Sarah succeeds on stealth. Everything's going great. She rolls her attack. Crit fail.
I had something similar, but I had the DM making checks to see what Dyson was doing specifically, and he just randomly rolled that Dyson was home.
Oh, okay.
And the wife and kid is there. And then she fails the attack roll, which was at advantage, too, because she's stealth. She's got a crazy rifle.
Right.
She fucks it, and then she keeps missing her attacks.
Right. Fails.
And he's got full cover, to be fair, too.
Right. And then I put she abandons stealth and comes in the house.
Comes in for melee.
Yep. Misses, hits.
And maybe the trauma gives her a minus, like she's just out of it. So she's kind of erratic, and she's not as focused as she normally would be if she was just in her right mind, you know?
Yeah.
And then this is when, because John and T2 roll really good, just kind of out of scene, and they're able to show up right at this point.
Right.
And John's able to get her to snap out of it, have her save her sanity check or whatever she rolls.
I put that at the intensity of that moment where she's like screaming at Dyson and she's about to shoot him, the GM goes, let's get one more sanity. And she succeeds.
Right.
But all it does is makes it so she doesn't fire. It doesn't relieve the room.
She realizes what she's doing.
Right. And that's when T2 shows up and is like, whoa.
Yeah.
They perform medicine checks.
I feel like T2 rolls a successful intimidation check on Dyson's wife by ripping his skin.
I did that as well. Intimidation.
It's like that's.
I actually put persuade using T2's score.
Well, yeah, I feel like he does intimidation to get their attention, and then they roll a group persuasion check to win him over. That he's like, you're right. This needs to be stopped.
See, and what's great for me is how I said like earlier, that player wanted to be able to use their strength as their persuade and stuff.
Right.
But the GM's like, we got to do something strength based. So he's like, I ripped the skin off of my arm, and they're like, that'll do. That'll work.
That was convincing. And I don't think this is correct after watching the rest of the movie, but this is originally where I had the end of Act 2. I think the end of Act 2 is actually when they leave Cyberdyne.
Oh, okay.
Like that's when Act 3 happens. That's usually half the size of Act 2, and it's everything is at that highest level.
Yeah.
And that last location's such a cool, like if it was a D&D location, the factory with all the smelting factory or whatever.
Oh, the very end, yeah.
It's really cool. It's a good location.
Oh, I can't wait to get there.
Yeah.
So when they go to the labs, I think that you're right on the acts.
Yeah. With Dyson's help, they get through the front entrance, no problem. They bypass this because I feel like this is the dungeon that the DM's really excited about. This is where he spent all his attention on traps and intricacies, and like this is when the party needs to be on his A game. But he doesn't realize he's dealing with a bunch of wild cannons that are going to fuck everything. Because
I put their persuade fails, but their intimidate successes. Because they all pull guns out.
Well, I feel like they just pull guns out. They make I had a group deception check, but without T2's +5, so they look just super out of place.
Right.
They fail, and then she just pulls a gun, and they fucking just tie him up and like throw him in the bathroom.
Tie him up.
Yeah.
And they don't know that there's a second guard there. They don't know that.
And now there's a clock ticking down for when Guard 2 finds Guard 1, which his name is Gibbons. So when Gibbons, where are you? You can't just leave the desk.
You can't leave the desk.
And then PCs move to location 2, where there's a puzzle door waiting to be solved.
Right.
Unfortunately, the second guard, and this is another way to interpret it, because I'm like, you could do a clock. He could just have the guard roll, and he rolled a nat 20 on his perception, and just immediately found the guard. Like, no time.
Right.
Just immediately.
No time.
Hits the silent alarm, locks down all the doors, So there's this huge complication thrown into getting to where the party needs to go.
Right. I put it was a magical alarm that stops the players from accessing the vaults.
Yeah.
Because I put that this was like a gnomish laboratory, if you will, where they were tinkering and magic stuff.
Right.
A lot of stuff.
And this is when Dyson, the party realizes something's wrong because Dyson's key card isn't working.
Yeah.
I feel like the DM rolls for Dyson's morale, and he starts to get a little spooked. He starts to lose faith a little bit.
Yeah.
As intimidating as T2 is. And then the guards call for backup because that's what they would do. There's no roll needed. They haven't been killed. That's what they do.
I put, after they can't get in, Barbarian breaks the door down.
Oh, yeah, and before that I had John, he pulls out his thieves' tools and starts, we've seen this before, he starts fiddling with this puzzle that was made just for him. That's what it seems like. This is just for him to shine. And then they try to bypass this. The DM worked out this whole intricate puzzle with this door, but then T2 does the Indiana Jones thing and grenade launches the door.
Yeah.
And just blows it to smithereens.
Just blows the door.
But triggers another trap in the next room.
I put triggers poison trap.
Yeah, poison, some kind of poison gas or something. But because T2 doesn't have to breathe, he immediately goes in and finds the hidden oxygen tanks.
Yeah. And just he's immune,
or the spells of air breathing or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And at that same time, that magical alarm triggers the villain.
Right. Anything that's on the police radio, he automatically knows.
Right. Exactly.
So he's able to locate them immediately. So, and it's another thing where the DM was probably like, okay, if they're stealthy about this.
Right.
Like the T-1000 will have a much harder time finding the party. If they just go balls to the wall, then he has the ability to find them.
He's gonna show.
Yeah.
Yeah. I put that, John successfully gets his puzzle solved.
He rolls a series of checks and gets the key.
In the meantime, all manner of guards show up.
And again, I think that John has expertise on perception, so his passive perception is also really high. So as soon as he's done unlocking the thing, he just happens to see out the window and he's like, oh fuck.
Right.
Oh no.
Absolutely. And that's when T goes to buy them more time.
T stands for time. He's a time-traveling time buyer named Timmy.
T2 goes to sipping on that sweet stuff.
That sweet, sweet nectar. Schnectar.
Cosmic nectar. So yeah, that's how I put it down, is that since he can't kill anybody, he had to go out there and run all these checks to buy them time, and he needed to succeed.
And the dean was like, you have to roll good or people are going to die, and you'll break your promise, which will be bad.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't break your promise.
Yeah.
So, and he's like, I'm going to do it. I'm rolling.
Yeah.
And just beautifully rolls, kills nobody.
Destroys the cars, though. Fuck those cars,
everything.
Man.
Just destroys all of the vehicles that they have. So he buys them time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're able to get the explosive setup, or whatever you're using, the magic triggers, he buys them time.
Right, just enough time for them to set up the bomb and all of this.
Right. And then right as they're going to escape, guards breach.
Right.
And make it in there. And we have, at this point, an NPC mortally wounded.
Right, Dyson gets gunned down pretty much. He gets shot 4 or 5 times.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's rough. It's so brutal.
Usually now in a movie nowadays, your NPC gets shot once and they're like, ugh. But he's like, oh god, fucking my bullets, shit.
Yes, so in my head, I imagine it more like arrows, right? Like chick, 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 chick. So he was just pelted with arrows and just kind of drops.
Mm-hmm.
But has the...
he has the trigger.
He has the trigger for the bomb.
Yeah.
And he sets himself up with kind of a dead man switch.
Right.
A manual dead man switch.
Which again is kind of like the syringe in the neck. It gives him a high modifier to persuasion. Because he's like, you all get out of this fucking room now. I'm dying when I do. This bomb's going off. They're like, shit,
right.
Shit.
I also think right before that we skipped that Sarah gets trapped.
She does for a bit.
In a dead end.
Yep.
And John freaks out And the Terminator's like, well, strength check, and just breaks through the wall and snatches her up. And again, this GM loves to break his environments.
Right. And I feel
Everywhere.
like maybe it's even something if you hit your DC or above on a strength check or something, they have some kind of like, table, a small table where it's like, this happens. Oh, I rolled a 6. Okay, you just completely demolish the wall.
Nice. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Different things like that. Also, I feel like there was a clock on the police breaking down the door. So the clock just ran out right when they were leaving. Yeah. And then they had convinced the Dyson enough that he sacrificed his life. Because he was on the fence, but they just convinced him enough that he's like, he knew it was the right thing to do.
I agree.
Or if it had been a little less, he probably would have been like, get them! They took me hostage!
Yeah. That's true. And that's when the villain arrives. And I feel like the villain arrives and the guards start using, I put magic spells of like sleep and smoke to stop the players from escaping. Because this is when they're...
Right. All the gas that they shoot out.
Yeah, all the gas that they're shooting. Right. But again, T2 doesn't have to use that stuff. He's immune.
Right.
So they send him out there, and he just non-lethal.
He just destroys the rest of everybody's car.
Again, non-lethal damage throughout the whole thing. Just he gets hit, he takes shots, but then just keeps blasting people.
Right.
And I feel like at this point, the T2 has taken a lot of damage. He's had the long rest, so he's recovered a bit. But his hit points are starting to show now. It's like, oof.
He's past half, and he doesn't have time to heal. Something like that. Like the tank's starting to get low.
Yep. I feel like he retrieves the vehicle and gets them out of there.
He does like a crazy skill check where he drives the vehicle. It's like the SWAT van. He drives it into the building, turns it perfectly, so the door
the lobby
is like facing the hallway where John and Sarah are.
And they get out.
They do.
And as they're leaving, that's, again, they're not being stealthy. The villain, the T-1000, perception check, sees them leaving.
Right.
And acquires his own vehicle.
And I almost feel like the DM would probably be like, I see why the party took the SWAT van, but that was really dumb because if it's connected to the police, the big bad can track it magically.
He also gets an airship to follow them.
Right.
A small, portable, like a smaller airship, and he is on it.
Right.
And this vehicle, I feel like this chase really highlights. Is this where you say that Act 3 has begun now?
Yeah, I would say right when they get the stuff, Dyson dies, and this is kind of like the last little bit right here. And I would say this is like the last 1 or 2 sessions right here.
Right. I feel like this chase scene is a little bit more brutal for the players because each vehicle they seem to obtain is not as good as the vehicle that the villain is getting.
Right.
They're severely outclassed.
Yeah. And
during this chase, I put that Sarah is critically injured and actually loses a huge amount of her movement. So she's only able to move like 10 feet per turn on her own.
And that's an interesting mechanical idea. Like if you get really low in hit points, your movement is limited. Like you can't move as far.
Right.
Or you have to spend hit points to move. Like if you want to move your full movement, like, okay, but it really hurts you because you're bleeding out of your guts right now.
Yeah. Then they crash. Everyone crashes again due to T2 performing crazy maneuvers and like jumping out of the vehicle, risking life and limb. Like the only thing that prevented this session from ending early was good rolls.
Right.
Each time, just boom, T2.
And the DM being like, hey, you guys need extra stuff. So they had just enough buffer and like skills and traits that they shouldn't normally have that they were able to survive.
Right. And I feel like so they get their crappier vehicle and they're in this final part of the chase. To me, this is almost like right where this happens is almost like one of Eric's games, Going All In. Because when he jumps into the back of the truck as the T-1000's pursuing them in the liquid nitrogen truck, he jumps in the back crawls up onto the diesel and just starts shooting it.
Right.
And I'm like, that is an all-in move if I've ever seen one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like heroic where he's just doing something crazy that shouldn't work.
Like, you're going to die doing this, dude.
Yeah.
You're going to die. And you don't, somehow he, like, succeeds, doesn't die, crashes the car. And this is where I put, they come crashing into a dwarven metal and magic foundry.
Right. It's like a forge of some kind.
Right. A giant dwarven metallurgy thing.
And I had this as, even though it doesn't make sense narratively, it's really fun mechanically, is that this is actually for the purposes of mechanics, T-1000's lair.
Oh, okay.
So he gets to do extra things in this part because, again, he's the only one to fight. There's no minions.
Right.
He's got to do it all himself.
I like that, actually.
Even though it's not his lair, it's going to work that way.
Right. That's for the dynamics and the mechanics.
He gets lair actions and reactions and villain actions, things like that.
I agree. And at first we have the characters running around trying to escape. Well, they think that they've defeated this villain because it's some of this magic cold or something seemed to have frozen it.
It's the nitrogen.
Yeah. It freezes him.
Yeah.
The T2 shoots it and it crumbles. And you're like, is that it?
Nope.
And it's not it.
He comes back.
He's reforming, so they escape into this place, into the...
I'm sorry to interject. I'm just thinking of this now. It would be cool, too, since he's just in his lair, is he transfers into, like, mythic mode, so he does go to 0, but then he resets, so it's like the final form of the boss.
That's cool, yeah, I like that. That's good, for sure. And I feel like the players, they, like, run around... T2 is low on hit points. He's even running on pieces of exhaustion right now.
His armor's way down. It's got holes chunked into it.
He's looking rough. Everyone's looking rough. It's not looking good. There's a lot of disadvantage on the table right now.
Right. And the T-1000's still coming super strong.
Yeah. Oh, and I also, because I put that he was a barbarian, so I also put that he's out of rage. So even his hit points, like, he doesn't have a lot of his resistances anymore.
Right.
And they have a battle so that John and Sarah can get further away.
Right.
T-1000 traps him, his arm, and then walks off.
And one thing I forgot to say, too, is the person playing T2, whenever you see T2's vision and it's red, that's how the player is explaining, this is how I see. Like, that's their interpretation. So you see it in that moment where you think he's dead, but you see it come back on. Too.
Oh, see, you've... Because this is when he gets trapped in the gear first, in his arm.
Oh, his arm gets ripped off?
Right, and he's, like, stuck there, and T-1000 leaves, and then we have this kind of dynamic where he goes after Sarah, and Sarah gets John away, and the T-1000 comes after Sarah, and Sarah's trying to fight him off,
and
is not doing so hot, and it's at that moment... where he's torturing Sarah, like he's injured her.
Oh, and he turns his finger into the spike. He's going to do the eye.
And he's like, call to John.
That's right.
And she won't do it. And before that, T2, again, he's already so messed up, rips his arm off, takes a pipe with him. So he is so low on everything right now. He's got nothing.
And he's probably got minuses to attacks and...
Oh, he's fucked.
Yeah.
But right before the boss kills Sarah... T2 fucking hits him and just takes a chunk out of him. Like, crit hits him, and T2 turns around, like, T-1000 turns around, Sarah escapes, and they have their battle.
Right.
And this is going into what you were just saying, how, like, he's, like, picturing the red, right? And describing it. And this is what I put. I put that T2 dies right here, goes unconscious, and then T-1000 walks away. But when T2 rolls his death saving throws, he rolls a crit on his first one.
So he gets 1 hit point.
Well, then on his second one, he rolls another crit.
Well, I think if you roll a crit save, like if you roll a 20, you come back with 1 hit point.
Oh, I thought it was just 2 successes.
No, it's 2 failures if you roll a 1. Because that's what we thought it was the same thing for both. It's not. If you roll a crit save... You're back away.
So then, like just
he
one
rolls
crit,
the 1,
boom.
On his
and
turn.
So boom, he's got 1 hit point left.
Ooh, doggy.
His eye comes up. He's got nothing, dude.
Right.
Nothing left. And this is when we have John being deceived by
T-1000.
T-1000,
Yep.
and it's working.
Mm-hmm.
But then, luckily, Sarah had been pursuing and finds them and shoots T-1000 a bunch.
Right.
Which does nothing. And as the two players are like, we are so fucked right now.
Right.
We have the T2 comes up, and I don't know what you'd say it was, but some sort of item, weapon, magic that does a push. It may not do much damage, but it pushes, and it just pushes him right off into the molten lead.
I would just say, like, it makes sense, especially if you have these rules where, like, T2's arm is gone, he's got 1 hit point, but he can still go all in.
Yeah.
And he can still, like, try to do something crazy, and if he rolls good, even if he's down to the nub, it'll still happen.
Right.
So I would probably interpret it that way myself.
Yeah. And this final hit, T-1000 falls into the hot lava, basically, the hot steel.
For me, I was saying the only type of damage that he's actually weak against, it's the only type you can hurt him with, is radiant.
Oh.
And so this lava pool does radiant damage.
Nice.
And it's pretty disturbing when he's in there and he's like, he's changing into the different things and his neck's all weird. And
see, that's why I was putting the mimics thing, and those, like, as he hits the stuff, his mimics go crazy because they're dying now.
Right.
And that was not part of the deal that this magic entrapment was, and he's dying, they're dying, this horrible thing happening, and after that, it's role play city.
And it's also John gets to have his breakthrough because basically T2 is his father figure, and now T2's got to die.
Right.
I'll be back.
It's very sad.
I think, too, in terms of how that last segment is kind of shot, it's kind of like there's a bunch of action and fighting, and then suddenly it gets all chill, where a D&D battle wouldn't be like that, but it'd be really fun to find a way where you could phase in and phase out a battle smoothly for combat like that,
I love that. And again, I love this movie. It is my favorite movie. I love it.
It's a good one. It's definitely classic. The effects are still pretty good. Some of them are not, like when Arnold spawns in, and you can see like the truck behind him because they kind of spawn in like an orb of energy.
Right.
You can see like the truck where it's kind of been carved away, that somebody went in there with highlighter or something and drew in that the steel was supposed to be like glowing hot. You're like, somebody fucking drew that in, dude.
Right.
But some of it, like the nuclear bomb part, still looks crazy. You're like, whoa, dude.
It was one of those movies, because I think that movie, The Abyss, was right before that.
I think The Abyss was like 87, but you had Terminator in 91 and then Jurassic Park in like 93. So like the early 90s were just
changed. Digital effects.
Crazy for the time. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
So that was a good one. Good pick, my friend.
Thanks, man.
I liked it. That was a good creative exercise. I think I need to do more of that for DMing purposes.
Once I got into it, I was like, oh man, chases could be so much cooler in D&D. Like there's so much you could add in there.
And I keep thinking too, like, how could you make a form of combat where it's a little looser so you can have character moments and then you can have fighting, but maybe the fighting stops for a moment or two and then it starts in a different part of the location or something,
Right.
Having a little more fast and loose. Like I said, my opinion is if you wanted to just do a straight up Terminator 2 adaptation, probably Blades in the Dark would work better for the cinematic quality.
Oh, it'd do real well. Right. Or at least for the Forged in the Dark system,
Yeah, the Forged in the Dark system. I mean, you could use a different version of it if you wanted to.
Right.
It would translate over pretty well.
Yeah, it was good. I had a good time.
Any parting thoughts?
I hope you all enjoyed it. I loved doing it.
It was a fun time.
And I think that you're the closer this time.
I am the closer.
Yeah.
I think that DMing it's really easy to get started, but it's terrifying. But it's a lifetime of it's a craft.
Yeah.
You can find techniques like this to make your DMing better and make the table have a funner experience. And this is kind of the way, DM's part of their job is game design. So this is kind of what Ian and I, our brains were thinking up is like, ooh, how could you put mechanics to this situation so players could live through it via their characters. So
absolutely.
So yeah, think about mechanics, play games, And stay sweaty while you're doing it.
Force damage, baby.
Stay sweaty.
Force damage. Force damage.
Like, share, subscribe.